Hello friends, James Corbett here with your thought for the day from CorbettReport.com. Today's thought for the day spurred by a little kids festival that I went to with my boy and my wife the other day here in western Japan, where everything was fun and they were giving out happy little balloons, and there was a show with one of the famous cartoon characters here in Japan, and everyone was having a great time until I looked at the balloon and I thought it was a little bit odd. The theme of this little kids festival get-together family day event was "We will cure cancer," and there was a blood drive and other health-related things, I guess raising health awareness, and who could have anything bad to say about that, right? Well, "We will cure cancer" is an interesting little slogan to work with because it seems emblematic to me of the cure cancer cult that has arisen in recent decades that I think is symptomatic of something much deeper in our society. Now, there's a lot of things to be said about cancer and curing cancer, the causes of cancer, but I think the emphasis on the drive for the cure, the fact that we've been researching for a century now and still cancer rates are skyrocketing, has to say something. And I have a bunch of articles here. WHO just released a new report last year showing that cancer rates are going to rise 50% within the next 2 decades. Colon cancer rates are skyrocketing among children in the United States of America. We have all sorts of other examples of this phenomenon, how cancer rates are rising in the Western world as we speak. And all of the emphasis, all of the research is always on, well, what are we going to do to cure this? And of course, it's always the slash and burn techniques, radiation, chemotherapy, and things like CFR globalist mouthpiece Angelina. Won't someone think of the children in the countries we want to invade? Jolie talking about chopping off her own breasts to try to cut the problem out before it even starts.
She's 37 years old, and she revealed in the New York Times this morning that she decided to get a double mastectomy to prevent, as a preventative measure, because she carries the gene that sharply increases your risk of breast and ovarian cancer. I think that this is brave beyond belief. I mean, good for her. Good for her.
Now, for those who still don't know what I'm talking about when I refer to the cult of cure cancer, I think you have to look at the cultural, almost celebration of cancer that's happened in the last few decades with the well-meaning and well-intentioned victim support of groups and the family support groups and all of this, but it almost becomes the cancer is a rite of passage, some sort of mark of some sort of transition in your life, and it's, embrace the cancer and all of this type of stuff that actually leads to articles like this. You couldn't make it up. Why the rise in cancer rates could actually be good news from the Telegraph that goes on to say, well, it's not that that cancer is rising particularly, it's just that people are living longer, so more people are getting cancer, so actually it's not a bad thing. And hey, as an added bonus, those slash and burn, radiation, chemotherapy, chopping off limbs techniques that we use to cure cancer, more people are surviving that these days, so that's a good thing. All of this seems slightly ridiculous to people with their heads screwed on straight, and it should, because if you've watched, for example, my recent, or not so recent, I suppose, episode of the podcast on Rockefeller medicine, and if you haven't, please go and do so, you'll know that the current state of allopathic medicine that we accept as the medical industry as we know it is really a creation of the large foundations and their big pharma cronies, specifically, too, in a lot of cases, keep people in that state of sickness where they need to be reliant on this system. So this is actually an industry that can be documented in a lot of different ways. For example, there's the book Rockefeller Medicine Men that I cited in that episode of the podcast that notes that throughout its existence since 1937, the National Cancer Institute has sought the key to understanding the etiology, cure, and prevention of cancer, largely in microbiological research. In 1971, the Nixon administration launched a grand war on cancer, the second leading cause of death, and gave the NCI a hefty 62% boost in its appropriations for the next year, the biggest since the 90% increase it received in 1957, which brought its annual appropriations to $815 million, and that's in 1977 dollars. And it also goes on in this book to note that the NCI's National Advisory Cancer Board expressed astonishment in the early 1970s that only 10% of the NCI's allocations were going to investigating the environmental contributions to cancer. Why is that? Is that potentially because there are multi-billion-dollar multinational corporations with direct interests in suppressing that knowledge? I would say so. As we covered just a couple of weeks ago on the Thought for the Day, we talked about how even the WHO has finally come out and admitted what we've known from experience for a decade or two now and from scientific research for several years, like in Venezuela. Glyphosate is a probable human carcinogen, the WHO finally admits. Of course, Monsanto immediately comes out and says, this is anti-science, and no, there's no proof of this. Water, we're dying, we're melting. Monsanto, of course, not liking this, and obviously so, because again, they have a direct financial interest in this type of direct carcinogenic link to their product not coming out in the exact same way we've seen before with asbestos or with big tobacco or any of these other entrenched financial interests that have a direct stake in not ever having it come out that their products are carcinogenic. And on that very note, let's not forget the testimony of Dr. Maurice Hillman, which, for people who don't know, a vaccine pioneer and one of the people who set up the Merck vaccine program, who, well, had a very interesting interview on PBS's The Health Century.
Well, there are 40 different viruses in these vaccines anyway that we were inactivating, and
but you weren't inactivating his, though.
That's correct. No, that's right. But yellow fever vaccine had leukemia virus in it, and this is in the days of very crude science. So anyway, I went down and talked to him, and I said, "Well, why are you concerned about it?" I said, "Well, I'll tell you what." I said, "I have a feeling in my bones that this virus is different. I don't know why to tell you this, but I've been around biology a long time. I just think this virus may have some long-term effects." And he said, "What?" I said, "Cancer."
I love it. I love it. Go ahead.
Oops, did I say that interview was part of PBS's The Health Century? What I meant to say is, yes, PBS The Health Century did air parts of that interview with Dr. Hillman, but for some reason or other, they left that part out. I just can't imagine why that would be. So let's keep this in mind as we continue to see this "we will cure cancer" cult starting to spread. Yes, we do want to cure cancer, although hopefully we want to do it in natural ways rather than the allopathic slash and burn techniques that are increasingly used. But the underlying point is that why is it never a part of the conversation why this cancer is occurring and what can be done to prevent it? I think that is an interesting excluded aspect from this cultural cancer conversation that's going on. This is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com. Thank you for joining me.